let's continue. Just one more thing before we even continue at the top of page 124. Beyond holiness, we also spoke about this unbridgeable gap, if you recall, between the finite being and the infinite God, because as holy as we may become through these mitzvot, we're still finite. And therefore, really, the only way to bridge that gap is to fulfill those mitzvot. Spoke about how we can become infinite by connecting ourselves to infinity, to God himself, to the divine, and to his holy mitzvot. That was more or less, those were more or less the big concepts that we studied thus far. And now I think we're ready to continue here at the top of page 124. Does anyone want to read? The Torah is thus a manifestation of the divine. Anyone?
Oh, I will.
Always. Okay.
I will.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Go for it.
The Torah is thus a manifestation of the divine, a ray of the infinite light penetrating the infinite abyss of the darkness of the finite. It and it alone constitutes the garments of the godly soul, facilitating its contact with the divine.
Right.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. So continuing to speak about this bridge between the finite and the infinite, something that otherwise would not be able to exist if not for the infinite himself that contracts himself, so to speak, right? God that contracts himself to be in touch with the finite, with us. So the way he did that channel, that bridge is through Torah, and it's mitzvot, of course, the actions of the 630 commandments that we've been speaking about, by contracting himself to that coin that becomes a charitable action, right? Tzedakah, or by contracting himself to tefillin, to that skin of a cow, so that we can put it on. Then God is inviting the finite to become a part of him. By doing so, the darkness that the finite finds himself, because of the lack of divinity in his sphere, all of a sudden is expelled. This light, through the contraction of God in his 613 mitzvot, this light now comes in and expels this darkness. In a way, I think, it reminds me of the verse. There's a beautiful verse in the book of Psalms, Psalm 19, I believe it is, that says, Torat Hashem temima meshivat nafesh. That means that the Torah of God is wholesome and it soothes the soul. And then it also says, Pikudei Hashem yesharim mesamechei lev, that the commandments of God, 613 commandments, are straight and rejoice the heart. Now, in Hasidic thought and in Kabbalistic thought, there are not that it strives to be a book of psychology. It's much more than that, I believe. But it does have some psychological remedies. And it says that the remedy for depression, which is something that many of us experience, especially now during the COVID-19, is to study Torah and to fulfill God's commandments. Why? So there are many reasons. Because then you become a channel for the divine, etc. But Rabbi Strauss here touches upon the reason. And that is that when we, Torat Hashem temima, when we are connected with that Torah of God that is wholesome, then it soothes the soul. Then all of a sudden the soul finds expression, and that light that is ignited in the soul or by the soul then expels the darkness that we're in. Same with God, with God's commandments. Pikudei Hashem yesharim, the commandments of God that are straightforward, that are very clear, mesamchei lev, they bring joy to the heart. Why so? Because again, each time we invite the divine into our lives, we invite his light. By inviting his light, it gets rid automatically of the darkness that we may find ourselves in. The infinity becomes a part of the finite, and there's nothing more illuminating and more relieving and liberating than that action. Try it. I'm telling you. I mean, I've said it to people. I've said it to myself, and it just creates wonders. When you find yourself in a state of some darkness, go and visit the sick. Go and pick up their phone and rejoice someone's heart. Do a mitzvah. And I promise you that light will expel the darkness that you're in. It creates wonders. Now, how? I think there's many psychological reasons to that, because when you serve, when we spoke about this on Thursday night during our Q&A, but when you become a source of service for the world, you're actualizing your purpose. and nothing brings more happiness than actualizing your purpose. Nothing brings more sadness than being self-preoccupied and not actualizing your purpose towards the other. So that's maybe one psychological reason. But yeah, the Kabbalistic reason goes even deeper, and this is exactly what Rabbi Stern says, because by doing so, you're inviting the infinite into the finite sphere that you're in. And that brings light into that darkness and expels it. That's the spiritual reason. So that's the idea here. Let's continue maybe a little bit more, and we can develop this idea as Rabbi Stern does. Of course, unless there's comments, disagreements, this should be.
I have a comment.
Yes, please, Linda.
So I understand all that, and actually, I think helping other people or doing something kind does make your heart feel better. So I understand that, except that now that we're in this virus thing, we hear about these doctors who every day put their lives on the line and are exhausted and frightened and depressed because of what they've seen, and doing all the good things for their patients doesn't seem to be helping them. What do they do?
So, well, maybe we have a few doctors on the line, so they probably would give a much better answer than I would.
I'll tell you what I did.
Please, Jordan, go for it.
I went with my wife to Flagstaff, and we hit the trails and connected with Mother Nature, and it felt great, and I'm ready to get back to it tomorrow.
That's beautiful. And I think that this is, in a way, this is the answer, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's no doubt a need for anyone who serves to replenish themselves, to go back to their source and draw some more water than to give to others. So I don't think that the doctors are experiencing any type of sadness or depression because of their work. I think they may be experiencing it maybe because of their overworking, in which they don't allow themselves to take that break, to go back and re-energize themselves, then to give. I think it's because of the work itself. And please, doctors here, correct, or any health worker, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm talking as a rabbi. I don't experience, God forbid, any depression, sadness because of my work. Quite the opposite. That only brings me tremendous satisfaction and fulfillment. I would experience it if I drain myself too much. Even though I think that eventually, you by giving and by taking yourself upon yourself more and more, you're expanding also your own being. And then Rabbi Stern speaks about that, that he learned that from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that I think I've mentioned the story, but it's one of the stories that stuck to my mind, that he had a point in his life where he was doing too much. He was involved with 3 projects and he didn't know what to take off the table because he felt like he needed to. It was becoming too much. So he went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him, not only should you continue to work on those 3 projects, but let me add a 4th one. Yeah. And then Rabbi Steinsaltz himself speaks about how the Rebbe wanted to change human nature. And we find that in science, I think in the concept of the black hole, that in a way by adding more and more pressure, 10,000 times the amount of pressure and towards a container that can only contain this much, but you add 10,000 times more, it changes the nature of the container. It makes it all of a sudden different and expandable, that at one point it can and will be able to contain those 10,000 amounts of pressure. And in a way, I think that human beings work that way. The more we take upon ourselves, yes, the more we may need to go and re-energize, and everyone has to re-energize themselves, but also the more expandable we become, the more then we can contain and the more we can give. So it's it's beneficial also. That's all I want to say. It's beneficial to take upon ourselves more and more.
So therefore, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Linda, whoever.
So therefore, the other answer, other than going out and doing kind things, maybe to know when to separate yourself from what you're doing and rest.
Right, absolutely. And I think that, we need big moments like that, sometimes days of vacation, but we also need moments like that each and every day within the day. I think prayer does that. I think that moments of meditation do that. You know, everyone has their way. You know, musicians know this. I mean, playing their instrument does that for them. But we need small moments like that every day, no doubt.
One of the things I'm seeing, because some of my clients are, you know, like on the front lines in medical professions and things like that, is not so much exhaustion, although that's there, but also seeing that a lot of people are getting sick by being negligent or bad, like politically motivated medical practices at the hospital, like that things aren't being done right. And it's the sense of injustice or inefficiency that is tipping them over into negativity. And so the way I work with that is just cultivating, you know, this is an imperfect world and there is injustice and there's ignorance, and like just you have to focus on what you can do something about, and with love in your heart, release the rest. And that's how I'm working with that one. That's the big cause of burnout that I'm finding.
Right. No, and that's an excellent point. I also think that, you know, sometimes we have to go back to the very why. And I say this again personally as a rabbi. I think sometimes you get exhausted, but you have to say to yourself, well, why did I get into this in the first place? And I think it's true for every human being. Why am I doing this mitzvah in the first place? Why am I visiting the sick in the first place? It doesn't have to be a profession, right? It could be just an act that drains you. Why am I speaking to this person that now, you know, has been on the phone for an hour crying about everything and their mother? Why am I experiencing this emotional drainage? And we have to go back sometimes to the very why. The reason we did this, if it's a selfish reason, then absolutely you'll be affected by this negatively because your selfishness will be hurt. You'll realize, oh, I'm not having any self-pleasure from this, so you'll get sad. But if you went into this for the right reasons, and if you went into this to be God's ambassador of healing to the world, then going back to that why will only fortify you, will only realign you, so to speak, will cause you to say, oh, okay, I might feel exhaustion and I might feel sadness even, but I know that I'm God's agent in this world, and there's no greater source of happiness and satisfaction than being partners with God. I think that's what we sometimes have to do. And I speak to everyone who engages in any type of good act of mitzvah. We're here for God. It's not about us. It's about our purpose, our divine purpose. Mm-hmm. And by reconnecting to the divine purpose, we'll find the divinity within us. And there's, I think, nothing more encouraging than that. So thank you for that, Margot.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, I'll say this. I think that in the Song of Songs, authored by King Solomon, which is really not just a story. The Song of Songs is an interesting book, just a brief introduction to it. The Song of Songs is about two lovers that fell in love with each other almost at first sight. And they made up to meet. And throughout the Song of Songs, there are attempts of this renewed meeting that never really truly happened, never materialized themselves. And this labor of love, this search for my beloved, exhausts the bride or the woman in the Song of Songs. And at one point she even gives up. And then after she gives up, the groom shows up and he knocks at her door and she says, look, I've searched for you everywhere. I came to our meeting point at the meeting time and you weren't there. I'm exhausted. I can't even get up. Pashatati et kutanti. I already got into my pajamas. I already took off my shoes. I'm not getting up for you. And then he continues to knock and she says, I can't. And then he goes away and then she regrets it. And then she wants to come back. But it's a story of a love that never materializes itself. Why am I thinking of the Song of Songs? Because as the Kabbalists explain, this is a story of the soul. We're sent to this world and we know that in heaven we met our beloved. We were one with our beloved and we're in this world. And up there we said, God, we'll meet you down here. And the soul searches for God and it can't find it. So it gives up. And then finally, God is awakened within the person. God comes to meet the person after seeing the tremendous effort the person invested in finding God. Kol dodi dofek pitchili, in the words of the Song of Songs, God comes and knocks and says, open up for me. And we say to God, no, we're too exhausted. We can't do this anymore. We've searched for you. We've given up. We'd much rather go to a rock and roll concert than go to you. We'd much rather go spend our money shopping than go to you. That gives us satisfaction more than we think, at least, than you will give us, because we've tried and you didn't show up. And God continues and perseveres and says, no, please open up for me. I need you. And the soul constantly plays this back and forth game, this ping pong game, so to speak, with God. And eventually that love doesn't materialize itself in the Song of Songs, but in the book of Ruth, which is a book of true love, where that love does materialize itself, then we find the soul finally finding its satisfaction through God. But I'm thinking of this story also because one of the verses of the Song of Songs says, "Samuni et notera et karamim, karmi sheli lo natarti." God gave me a role to keep his vineyards, to be the guardian of his vineyards here on earth, but I forgot to guard my own vineyard. I'm guarding the world, but I'm not even guarding my own vineyard. And there's this tremendous act of labor, right? Of labor of love in the Song of Songs by the soul that is exhausting to the soul. And then God appears to us and then we say, no, God, I'm too exhausted. And I think that I'm thinking of this because I want to take this idea that we're speaking about in a different direction. That sometimes when we are exhausted, sometimes when we have given so much and we've given all the expression for the soul that it needs to have, we become exhausted. But if we can continue to express resilience and then persevere, then we'll find God. Let us not allow this exhaustion to or cause us to go on a strike, so to speak, and forget about God. God sometimes appears specifically after the exhaustion. That's when he appears the most. And I've noticed this, to speak practically about this big idea. I've noticed that personally. Sometimes I'm too exhausted to go to a social party, something that we haven't experienced in some 5 months now. But I'm too exhausted to go into this and that meeting. And I force myself to go. And when I force myself to go, I find that meeting or that social party to be the most rewarding that can be. To be a meeting that I could have never fathomed its success. Why? Because I know from the book of the Song of Songs that God sometimes appears specifically after I've given it my all. If I give up then, that's when I lose it all. When I don't give it up then, that's when I'll find God. And I say this to anyone, again, who helps. I think doctors, I know, get exhausted, and health workers get exhausted, and anyone who gives to others gets exhausted. But we have to keep this idea in mind that sometimes it's specifically after the exhaustion, if I can continue to be as resilient as can be, that I will find God and his tremendous blessings. If I give up then it will be like the story of the Song of Songs, the love that never materializes itself. So we have to keep that in mind. Sometimes just going that extra mile is where we'll find God. Okay.
Good.
Let's continue on. Let's continue here with the paragraph that's, unless again there's any other comments, but continuing now with the words of the Tanya itself. For when a person actively fulfills all the precepts, does anyone want to read? And by the way, I managed successfully. It did upload. If you go on your chat, I'll email it to you nonetheless. But if you go on your chat, you'll find opening the Tanya, the document itself. If you don't have one, you can follow it now.
Oh. You want me to continue?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Linda. Why not? Anyone.
For when a person actively fulfills all the precepts which require physical action, and with his power of speech, he occupies himself in expounding all the 613 commandments and their practical applications. How you can say that word for me.
Halachot, yeah.
Okay. And with his power of thought, he comprehends all that is comprehensible to him in the pardes of the Torah. Then the totality of the 613 organs of his soul are clothed in the 613 commandments of the Torah.
Right. Let's continue with Rabbi Schnauzer's explanation. I think it's a very powerful thought. Go ahead, continue. The human body.
The human body consists of 248 members and 365 blood vessels. The soul, too, includes 613 organs, which are the spiritual counterparts of the 613 organs of the body. Each of the 613 organs of the human soul has one of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah as its specific garment.
Right. So it's a very powerful idea. And by the way, there's a book called Sefer HaCharedim. I don't know if it's being published these days, and even more so, I don't know if it's in English, but it's a great book that basically what it does is that it takes all those 613 commandments and applies them to the body of the human being. So for example, tzedakah would be right here by the hands because it's an act of giving. Studying Torah is an act of the brain. And it's interesting to note that, again, the 613 commandments are not just random commandments, but they are there to fortify the entire being. Each commandment relating to a different part of the human body. Now, I think to be a complete and a wholesome human body, what this also means is that we have to try and do as many commandments as possible, because then it's like going to the gym, only working on the muscles. What about the rest? So you'll be deformed at the end of the day. I mean, in a good way, maybe, but still. So it goes back to exactly what we said. You have to spend time with yourself, not to spend time with yourself, but to spend time with those parts of the body that are not being activated when you're working with others. So that, again, you can maintain a healthy balance of divinity, of holiness in your body. So, by the way, these are harsh words to say, but words that need to be said. When we reduce Judaism just to tikkun olam, for example, just to repairing the world, what we're doing is that not only are we doing injustice to Judaism, because it's not just about that, it's about that, but not just about that. But what we're doing is also we're doing an injustice to the human body, because then it's only the heart and the good actions that are being worked on. What about Judaism as the study of Torah? What about Judaism as prayer? What about, which is the soul itself? What about Judaism as using our legs or our arm to put on tefillin, for example, or the eyes. They say that the eyes are connected to the Shabbat candles, candle lighting on Shabbat. Those eyes that see the candles really are benefiting from the light of the candles. So what about that, for example? No, if it's only about tikkun olam, then I've disregarded the rest of the body, and then our body becomes a body of imbalance. So it's important to remember this huge concept that the 613 commandments are there really to create this perfect balance between all of the organs and the blood vessels of the body. And the more we can connect to each of them, the more our body can be wholesome. That's really the idea here. It's interesting also to note that, you have 248 positive mitzvot, which are against the parallel to the 248 members of the body. And then you have those organs of the body, and the 365, which are parallel to the blood vessels. By the way, medically, I don't know if this has been confirmed. Maybe the doctors here can tell us.
I don't think I've seen it in any anatomy textbook, Rabbi.
No.
Really.
Well, who says that Tanya is not in an anatomy textbook?
But it's an amazing concept, because first you're saying that the best way to connect with the divine is through the mitzvot, and now the Tanya is taking it another step in that each mitzvot has a spiritual component that goes into an organ in the body.
Right.
So it totally encompasses the human being by doing a mitzvah.
Right.
It's
exactly.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. Yeah, that's right. And each mitzvah, again, activates a different part of the body. Now, what's interesting is this. Again, you have 248 positive commandments. So actions, things that you have to do. But you also have 365 negative commandments. By not doing things, you're also activating a part of the body. So, for example, let's take the 10 commandments, which are most known. Do not steal. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. All these do nots are activating a part of your body, which means and this is where I want to get to, which means that we are in a way always connected to God, because by not stealing right now, I'm connecting to God. That organ of the body is being activated. And that's why dare we not say that a Jew is not connected to God, a Jew that's commanded to fulfill the 613 commandments. And even in it's his or her worst situation, he's still connected to God. Because
by doing nothing, you've committed 365 commandments.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. It reminds me of the Talmudic statement that says that that speaks about the notion of sleep. And the Talmud says that Sheina, sleep, tov lareshaim v'tov la'olam. Sleep is good for the wicked and it's good for the world when they sleep. Why? Because when they're sleeping, they are automatically doing 365 negative commandments. But by the way, for the righteous, it's not good. For the righteous, sleep is not good. It's bad for the righteous and bad for the world, because then the world can't benefit from their light. But again, you see, why is it good? Why is sleep good for the wicked? Because it's good for them, not just for the world. They're not committing any crimes, but also for them. Why is it good for them? That's because in their sleep, they connected to God more maybe than when they're up. And again, this is rooted in this very Kabbalistic concept here, that by not doing things, we still remain
more weight.
Sorry, William.
The positives carry more weight.
Yeah, the positives carry more weight. So what's the difference between the two? And the Tanya is going to go into this. The difference between positive commands and negative commandments is not whether we're connected to God or not, because as mentioned, even through negative commandments, but not doing anything, we're still connected. The difference between the two is that by engaging in positive commandments, in the 248 commandments, we are drawing God's light down to the world. By not doing anything, we're not drawing down anything. We're connecting on a very personal level. So there's parts of our body that are activated through the negative commandments, but it's not drawing anything down to the world. Active commandments are what create the light in this world. So they're not just good for us, but they're good also for the world itself. And really the only way to become that ultimate channel of God is not just through the 365 commandments, but even more so, it's through the 248 commandments. And each time we do them, then a light comes down to the world. It's interesting to note also that, we've spoken about the word mitzvah. Mitzvah, we said comes from the word tzevet, which means partnership. When we do a mitzvah, we're not just doing a good deed. That's the worst translation for the word mitzvah. What we're doing is that we're connecting to God. We're partnering with God. That's what it means. But the word mitzvah also, as explained in other places, is that if you divide the word into two, you have matz vav hey or mitz vav hey. What's a mitz in Hebrew? So again, the word mitzvah, mem tzadik vav hey. So if you divide the word into two, you have mem tzadik, that's one word, and vav hey, another word. Mem tzadik in Hebrew means juice, meats, right? You've been to Israel and you've ordered a mitz tapuzim.
Yeah.
That's it. And orange juice. What's a juice? A juice is something that compresses or crushes, right, in a way, the fruit and draws the juice out of it. So what's a mitzvah? It's taking God and compressing it like a juice maker and bringing his juice to the world. Mitzvah is a matz vav hey. Vav hey are the letters of God. When we do a mitzvah, we're producing God's juice for the world.
Oh, that's
so it's not just a partnership, but it's again drawing down God and his juice, so to speak, right, for the world to drink. And that's done particularly through the 248 commandments, much more than 365. When we do a mitzvah, remember, you becoming a juice maker that produces God's juice for the world. Think about it that way. How beautiful.
Great.
I promise you that tastes much, much better than mitz tapuzim and orange juice.
Beautiful.